Hi everybody and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to show you step by step how to paint this winter landscape. So we're using a 9x12 canvas, a number 30 filbert brush, and I'll list everything below in the description of this video. I'm going to begin just with a little bit of water on my brush and some neon yellow warm. Of course you can use any yellow that you want, so I'll just pull a little bit along the top of the canvas, kind of just crisscross back and forth, and then add in a little bit of white to create some softer highlights and golden tones. So just a little bit here and there on the top left and right. I'm going to pull down below for the reflection in the water as well. And then I'm going to add a little bit of pink first before I do that with a bit of white. So just soft brush strokes, back and forth, side to side, crisscross, however you want to add it. Just don't overblend and make one solid color. So you want to be careful about adding a little bit here and there without losing either one of those colors. I'm going to take a little bit of white, yellow, and pink and just pull and flick down the bottom just so that we have that nice soft reflection in the water. And I'm just going to pick up a little bit more of my white and my yellow to make it nice and bright. I don't want it to be too pink. I want to have more of that golden peachy color in the water. Okay, I'm going to wash this brush out after adding just a little bit more white up here. I want to have it a bit brighter so that I can come in with my blue teal and make it really stand out. So I'm going to wash that brush off, and now I'm going to use my number 4 filbert brush. I'm going to take a little bit of my blue teal and a little bit of white, make a really soft, frosty, minty color. And then I'm just going to add a touch of it on the top in the middle here. Okay, I'm going to rinse that brush out, set it off to the side for just a few minutes, and I'm going to switch over to my 1-inch oval mop brush. You can use any type of stipple brush or mop brush that you have, and I'm just going to tap into a little bit of yellow, white, and that blue teal to make a soft green shade, sort of like a green gold color, and just kind of tap to really load the brush. And then I'm going to go in and begin tapping lightly about a quarter of the way down the canvas. And this is just for creating a bit of sunlit foliage way off in the distance. This will just peek through here and there with our darker, bigger trees that we're going to add later on. So I'll just add a little bit by tapping and then softly twirl and swirl my brush around to make a little bit more of a faded blended look. I'm going to take a little bit of white here and soften up and brighten up some areas. It'll just change the lighting up a little bit. Now I'm going to use my number 4 filbert brush again. I'm going to take a little bit of my neon pink and my phthalo blue and blend the two together to get a really nice sort of a dioxazine purple color. And then I'm going to start coming with the edges of my river. The edges of my riverbank and the outline of my snow-covered rocks and just the bank on either side. So this is going to really give us that contrast and that depth that we want and create a beautiful mood for this painting. So just kind of cutting around here and there, creating soft little brush strokes and half circles and wiggly lines. So you can make yours a little bit wider or narrower than mine, as long as you use the same type of brush stroke, colors, and highlights. Yours is going to look pretty much the same, so don't worry if yours is your shape of your river is a little bit different than mine, and it'll still look really nice. I'm going to pull in a little bit of my blue teal as well and incorporate that in the colors that we're using here. I just think that would be really pretty to add, and I will be adding a little bit more of that to the snowbank and some of the trees after. I'm going to pull in the reflections of the tree trunks just by pulling and flicking using these darker colors, and then I slide and wiggle really quickly and tightly as I'm dragging the brush down. I'm wiggling at the same time to give it that blurry look in the water that the reflections tend to have. And I'm just going to continue building up my shadows, the shapes of my snow-covered rocks that I want to have. So this will be our first stage and step, and then we're going to come in and add, really play up more on the phthalo blue and adding a bit of white, tint it here and there with a little bit of that pink, and then we'll be adding our beautiful highlights, of course, that accent the sunset color above. So I'm not going to wash my brush off. I'm just going to take a little bit of white and start adding my highlights slowly and my soft blanket of snow. So just by doing this, it gives me little bits of frost forming on part of the river, and I think this is a really nice touch to the painting. It breaks up all the dark, like it gives you sort of a mid-tone, I guess, in the water. So we've got the really dark outline, and then we've got the really bright canvas and highlights in the water. So by adding a few pastel tones in the water for our shadows, I think it just really breaks it up and helps to bring everything together. You got to have those mid-tones. And now I'm going to start coming in and filling in all of my snow-covered rocks and the land on either side. So I'll do this gradually. And this is a really pretty blue. Now this is very close to light ultramarine blue or light blue violet. And you can just simply make it how I did here with phthalo, pink, and white. Depending on the blue, pink, and white you use, it will change a little bit. You may get something a little bit darker or a little bit brighter, but I think overall you can't go wrong with these colors for making a nice shade of blue here, because it's got that bit of mauve or violet hint to it that I think looks really, really pretty with the turquoise that we're going to be adding pretty soon. So all the colors work really well together in this painting. And I'm going to just keep filling this in. Sometimes I'm going to use and add like a little bit more white. I'm doing this on purpose so that we play up on where the light's hitting the snow. So some areas will be a little bit lower, right? So when there's those dips in the snow, it's going to make them look darker because the shadow will be heavier there. And then where they come up higher, it'll be a little bit brighter, and therefore I'll be adding more white to my blue or blue and pink. And I'm going to cut in and around and exaggerate my shadows a little bit more and really make my snowbank stand out and my rocks stand out by adding that blue and purple. I'm going to use more blue than, well, I said purple, but I mean the pink and the blue together, making the purple color. I'm going to use more blue though because it's a lot darker, so you'll see here and there I'll just take a little scoop of the blue and use straight blue. I think that this is a nice way to really make your highlights stand out, and like I said before, don't forget to go in and add a little mid-tone here by tinting your white with those colors as well. So I'm going to just keep going here, working my way up to the horizon. And then of course I'll fill in the right side. And once I get this all filled in, I'm going to wash this brush out and I'm going to start adding my pretty golden highlights. That will be the Luminous Neon Yellow Warm. I'm using Holbein for my neons or my luminous colors, but again, many of you watching my tutorials don't have these colors, and I don't want you to think that you can't paint along if you don't have them, so just feel free to use any yellow that you have. If you want it to be a little bit warmer, then just add a tiny bit of orange to your yellow. If you have a cool yellow or really, really bright yellow, then you can just sort of tone it down a little bit and warm it up with some orange or even a little bit of pink or red. It'll be a little bit slightly different than what I'm using today, of course, but it'll still work just fine. I'm going to wash all of that blue out of my brush and start with a little bit of neon yellow warm, and my titanium white. I'm just going to mix it up till I get a really nice bright color here. I want to have more white than yellow, of course. That way it won't turn green when I layer it over part of the blue area. So I'm just going to go on the very top of each stone or rock, and wherever I want to have it look a little bit more round and raised up on either side. And I'll just add a very thin, sort of like half circle and little swirls here and there. If I want it to look a little bit more whimsical, then I'll kind of make it a little bit swirlier looking. But for the most part, I'm just going to do straightforward outlines of each of the stones. And I'm also going to add just a little bit to the sky. I really want to make sure it dries that bright golden color. So sometimes it takes a few layers to get that, but I'd rather do that now than go back later on after I've added my trees. I'm going to pick up a little bit of my neon pink now, and I'm going to mix that in with my light golden color to make a really pretty coral color. Just have a little bit of a pink tone. I want to match my highlights in the foreground down below to the colors that are going on in the sky. So we've got that blue teal that we added up there as well, and I'm definitely going to be using that down in the foreground like I mentioned earlier. So we really are tying all the colors in together. I'm going to pull and flick straight down with my brush and then lightly go across with my highlight colors as well, just to make my reflections really stand out in the water, and just define some of these highlights on these rocks a little bit more. Okay, so I'm going to rinse my brush out, and I'm going to start working on the shadow parts again, but I'm going to add another color. So this is where I'm going to come in with my blue teal, and I'm just going to wiggle and kind of zigzag around here at the base of either side of the river. And then I'm going to go right back into my phthalo and my pink, and I'm not even going to wash my brush off. I don't mind if all three of those colors mix together. They look really pretty when they're all mixed together. And if I get a little bit of pink here, a little bit of turquoise here, a little bit of blue here and there, I like the way it looks when it's kind of randomly blended across the canvas. So rather than make one straight color on my palette, I like to take a little scoop of each color and let it kind of blend out and fall wherever it does as I pull it along the canvas. I think it's more fun that way, and it looks more natural. So I'm going to just go around here wherever I feel like I want to have a little bit more of a shadow and a reflection here. The trees, the tree trunks, I want to go over these a little bit more. So I'll pull in a little bit more color, wiggle around a little bit, and then in some areas lighten it with that soft bluey pastel color that we made. Again, that just gives us, it breaks up all the dark colors and lines, and it softens everything. Plus it makes it feel like we've got a little bit of that ice forming on part of the river. So I'm going to build up my shadows a little bit higher on these rocks. So instead of a thin line just right at the bottom where they meet the water, I'm going to make them a little bit higher. So I'm going to go up 1/4 of the way up each of those rocks, well, almost all of them. And so it'll just make them, it gives it more depth overall when you do that, and the more shadow. So I'm going to start adding my trees now, and I'm going to make a mixture of my yellow, pink, and my blue. This is just going to be a nice rich color. Sometimes, like, I'm not over mixing, so I'm going to have, when I pull it out of my brush, sometimes I'll pull out a little bit more where I have that pink, and sometimes it'll be a little bit more of that blue and yellow together, making a beautiful sap green. So I want to have a few that are going to be leaning towards the center of the canvas. That really helps draw the eyes in and create that focal point and center of interest. and I want to have my trees coming from different parts of the canvas. So I'm not having any coming right down close to us in the foreground, like not the bottom of the canvas. I want to keep my trees kind of no lower than halfway down the canvas, I guess. But you want it to have different widths as well. So you can see I'm just using my number 4 filbert brush for creating all of these trees here. But depending on how much pressure you're using, you can change the width of them really easily. So pushing harder, I'm using the full width of my brush and making this big tree right here. I want to have it curve in a little bit, and I want all these trees to go right off the canvas. That'll give us this really interesting perspective. It kind of feels like maybe we're sitting on a bench or we're on a bridge, and we're much lower than those trees are, so we can't see the tops of them. And I don't know, I just really like painting interesting perspectives in my landscapes, and I think it makes it interesting for you guys too to see different types, and it helps you learn a lot. So I'm going to go on both sides and just keep adding trees here and there, noticing the placement of them and how they're all different. They're placed on different levels, and they're going slightly in different directions, and some of them are more to the right and some of them are more leaning towards the center. I'm going to just blend out the colors on my brush and then go back for a little bit more of the warm yellow that I have, and just tap all in the back there, so that I'm going to create a nice base for my dense trees that are going to be here on either side. So sometimes I really want to play up more on that green gold color. And if you don't have neon yellow warm, like I mentioned earlier, you can take any yellow you want and you can warm it up by adding a little bit of orange, pink, or red to it. Or you can just use any sap green, hooker's green. You can even take black and add yellow to black, just to get like a dark, deep green color. Any type of green will work for this. I haven't tried phthalo green. We're definitely making a few blue-green shades in here, so I know that looks nice, but I think it would be nice and important for this specific painting to make sure you have a yellowy green, a warm green. So you can see here I'm coming in with that blue teal, and I'm starting to create some cool shadows on the far right just by tapping in. I'm going to add a little bit of white to my blue now, and I'm going to start adding some snow at the base of the tree and then going up the side of the tree as well. I'm not going to use a lot of pressure. I'm going to barely touch the canvas here and just have it on its side fairly flat, but like I said, you don't want to push too hard, otherwise you're going to get that real blended look. We want it to look frosty and snowy, so textured like, and have it stand out from the tree and make it look like it's kind of bumpy and frosty looking. So my tree underneath is still a little bit wet, the first base coat there, so it's not working how I want it to. And I just made it go a little bit off the tree trunk more than I wanted it to, so I'm going to go over it. I'm going to make the snow on this tree trunk stand out a little bit more by making it darker around the tree. So I'm just going to add a little bit more of my blue here and just blend that out a little bit. I don't completely want to cover all those background colors because I think they are all really pretty together, and I don't want to lose that. And now I'm going to come in and add more white. So I'm going to apply more paint to my brush and just keep building this up one layer at a time. As it dries, I'll be able to make the snow and the highlights really stand out. Now I've got a little hint of that peachy pink color left there, so I just scoop some of that up and start adding it before it can dry. I want to use that and add it over some of the rocks that are closer to the center of the canvas and the background. Now I'm using that same kind of drag and pull technique. It's the same type of technique you would use if you were using a palette knife. I'm just holding my brush flat and very gently pulling and dragging with whatever color I want to create that frosty kind of highlight snowy look. So I'm using turquoise or teal blue. You can use a bright aqua green, base turquoise, that would look really nice actually, because I'm going to be using some red later on in this painting, so that it would pop even more if you had more of a green turquoise. But I love this blue teal, so I've been using it a lot more lately. And I'm going to do the same thing on this tree over here, just kind of make it look like there's snow drifts kind of going up either side of it. And then add a little bit at the base. I'm going to create some more light here, very gradually, just a little bit at a time. My white is always tinted with something. So it's this combination of blues that are really quite pretty for the shadows here in the foreground, a little mixture of white and teal, and then alternating with my phthalo blue and my white. I'm going to do another layer of snow, just gradually, layer at a time, building up the snow here on this tree trunk. And I'm just gonna add a few more highlights here and there, a little bit of what's left of my peachy paint color, a little bit of that smoky blue in my brush. Whatever I've got going on there, I'm just gonna add a little bit more depth by creating little half circles here and there and slopes on my snow. All right, using my number 10 mini liner brush, you can use any liner brush that you have. I'm going to take quite a bit of water and mix up some of my phthalo blue here. The trick is to have lots of water when you're using a tiny brush like this, otherwise it's going to be really frustrating and quite difficult to create your branches. So you want to keep your paint really loose and flowy, very fluid-like, thin paint. And I'm just going to add a few little branches here and there. Some of them are going to be thicker than others, and I don't want to use too much pressure, so if you just kind of let off and concentrate on just using the very tip of your brush, you'll be able to create your branches and tree trunks a lot easier, and you'll learn how to handle the liner brush a lot easier. Just practice with the pressure that you're using. They do take a lot of practice to get used to. These are a little bit finicky brushes to use. The one I'm using right now is quite old. I've just ordered a brand new set of liner brushes, so I'm really looking forward to getting those in. I'm going to keep on adding branches and thinner trees so that we really have some variations in sizes of trees, different types of branches going on, so ones that are kind of just going on either side here with no foliage on them, just little branches sticking out, I think can be quite nice. Kind of reminds me of those Bob Ross paintings. Watching his tutorials as a kid used to really inspire me, and I think I kind of take the lessons I learned from him and the inspiration without even realizing it in my day-to-day art. It made a big impact on me and taught me quite a few easy techniques. Even though he worked in oils and I work in acrylic, the same rules still apply for brush strokes. So I'm going to make a few thicker branches, you can see here, by pushing a little bit harder but not too hard, and adding more paint to my brush. I'm going to come around on the edges a little bit again, define and add a little bit more depth wherever I need to using that blue. Now there are a few other blues that you could use for this painting. I might have mentioned them earlier. Prussian blue would be nice. There's cobalt blue. Well, we've got the phthalo blue. There's ultramarine blue. I will be adding my ultramarine blue a little bit later on, and that is a really pretty blue that goes quite beautifully with the peachy coral color that we've got going on in this painting. They're very complementary. So I've just added a little bit more of my neon yellow warm. I've got my number 30 filbert brush again, and I'm going to tap those colors together and then start tapping in very gently some foliage on a few of my branches. I don't want to have too much foliage. I really want to keep the beautiful soft colors that we have going on there in the sky. So I'm just going to do this very sparingly. And then I'll be coming in with some more branches, another tree. I'm really going through my yellow today. This is like the third time I've had to add more, but it's a gorgeous color to use. And I just love the mossy kind of natural looking green that it adds to this painting. It's more like of an earthy color. With all those soft, pretty pastels we've got going on, it's always nice to add and have an earthy color in there somewhere. So that's what this does, is really kind of brings it all together and balances it out. Okay, I'm going to start from the bottom right here, and I'm just going to pull a fairly thick, wide tree. Again, just in the same colors, that deep green that I made with my yellow and my blue. Turning my brush to make it very narrow, of course. And I'm going to go over to my filbert brush now, take my bluey green color with some white, and I'm going to add some snow at the base like I did with the other trees. So I want to make it look like it's very soft and just kind of collecting there, starting at the base. It'll be a little bit more of a brush stroke here and a soft blending, and then it'll be that very light, barely touching the canvas, pulling and dragging very, very lightly. And then it kind of just skips spaces when you do this. And I use this technique for adding highlights and shadows on my mountains as well. So I'll do this a few times. Again, I'm going to go back to this tree over here. And as the paint sets in and starts to dry, you're able to go in and really bring out those highlights that you want to add, or lighter shadows, I guess. My bright highlights are, of course, those golden and peachy ones. So these are just lighter shades of my shadows, my cool shadows. And it all will dry a little bit darker than what it's initially going on as right now. When it's wet, it's always a little bit brighter. So I'm going to wash this brush out, and then I'm going to add a little bit of scarlet red here and black. I'm going to be using my mini number 10 liner brush. I'll mix the two together. I'm going to use more red than black, of course, because the black is very dominant and overpowering, and I really want this deep red color in with my trees, because of course red and green are complementary colors. So when you watch what starts to happen here, the colors really start to pop. So all I'm going to do is just pull and wiggle and pull out some branches here in the front of the tree, go over some along the side, and it's gonna make everything, all the other colors, stand out a lot more. The red, what it does is it complements all the green, that green gold that we've got. It also looks really pretty with the blue, so you can't go wrong. If you use whatever red that you decide to use will work. It'll just look a little bit somewhat different, but no matter what red you use, it's going to look really complementary and pretty. So don't be afraid to try it. You can use vermilion red, you can use cadmium red, you can use, what else is there? Crimson red. Crimson and scarlet are my go-tos. I also love neon red, but that didn't really work for this part of the painting because this is a really dark part of the painting. But even when even when I'm working on my darkest parts of my paintings, I really stray away from using straight black, which seems like the obvious choice. I think that it is much better to tint your black with something, and you'll just get much more of a rich color, and you'll have complementary colors. Even if you've got a dark color that looks like it's black but it's tinted with something else, your painting will just look better. So I'm going to add a little bit here down in the water as well. Like I said, I want all my colors to flow together. So if I've got a little bit of my trees, I really want to incorporate a little bit in the water too. Maybe there'd be a little bit of a reflection going on. So I'll add a little bit more of this beautiful deep red color here and there. Now I also want to add some snow on some of these branches here. So after pulling out another branch, I'm going to go, without washing my brush off, straight into my teal, a little bit of white, and kind of just marble it. So I'm not blending it in one color. I'm not making one color on my palette. I'm taking a little scoop of each color, and then I'm twisting, pulling, and rolling my brush down those branches. So they're really going to stand out by doing this as well. And right here, I don't have a branch yet. I came in with my teal and my white first, and now I'm going to come in underneath with my dark red color that I made. So that works as well. You don't have to do, you can do it in the reverse order is what I'm saying. So I'm going to add a few more branches here and there. I'm not going to add snow to every single one. It's not necessary. But if you have a few here and there that you add it to, it'll look really pretty. Again, because you've got that teal and red side by side complementing each other. Okay, with a clean brush, I'm going to come in and add some more highlights now. I'm going to just alternate with my lighter cool shadows to my brightest golden highlights. So I'll be going from turquoise and white up the side of the tree here for that snow, and then I'll wash my brush out and go into my luminous yellow warm, my neon yellow warm, and a little bit of white, maybe a little bit of pink as well. I might even use I probably will end up using a little bit of that scarlet red with white and yellow, and that can also make a pretty peach color that you guys will see here pretty soon. Alright, so just a little scoop of titanium white, a little bit of that yellow, and a little bit of my scarlet red. We've got a very pretty color, and I'm going to go over adding more light highlights and little lumps and hills here. And I want to make it look like there's more of a separate like snowbank or hill right here in the foreground. So I'm just going to pull the rest out of my liner brush and then go over to my filbert, pick up a little bit more of that peachy color, and just very lightly dust over the top and soften it and blend it out. The next thing I want to do is just take a little bit more white, blend this around, take some turquoise, a little bit more of my bluey purple color, and then right below here just add a little bit more of that shadow. That'll also make my highlights, those soft golden peachy colors, stand out. Okay, without washing my brush off, I'm going to go right into that black and red, and I'm going to add a few patches, wiggles, and branches here and there. Wherever I have that turquoise especially, I'm going to add a little bit more of that because I'm loving the play on colors here. I'm going to add a little bit more right here behind the tree again. I want it nice and dark right in this area here between these two trees. And then I'll be adding a few snow-covered branches just to break up that blocked-in area there of that dark red. So I'm just going to take a little bit more of my white and my teal, and I'm going to come in and add some snow-covered branches just to break this area up a little bit. I'm going to go around and add a few more little branches here and there, and just by taking a little bit of my red, black, blue, and some water for those branches kind of on the top and around the center of the canvas. I'm going to be adding a little bit of my white to my red and black here, and I'm going to be adding a little bit of branches up here using this color, and then I'll add a bit of it on either side of the rocks and the riverbank. The next color I want to add with a clean brush, my liner brush again, is my turquoise and my white. And I'm just adding a very, very small amount here in the distance. So right here under these rocks, I'm just going to add it and you'll see how pretty it looks. Just makes that gold glow even more. And just a really, really light amount here. So more white and just a tiny bit of that turquoise. And then I'll go back to adding a few more branches here, just with that red, black, white, a little bit of turquoise in there. A little bit of water on your brush definitely helps. Just use a very little pressure when adding these tiny little branches. The more delicate you are with your brush, the more delicate your branches and trees will look. Okay, I'm just taking a little scoop of red and adding it here for another flare and pop of color. I know that it is going to dry a little bit darker, so I'm not afraid of being a bit generous with the red right now. And then I'm going to wash this brush out and I'm going to squeeze out a little bit of my ultramarine blue, and I'll add the next layer of color in our foreground. So here I've got my filbert brush, my number 4 again. I'm taking my ultramarine blue with a little bit of my titanium white, and I want to make sure this color is going to be darker than what we've already got here. I'm adding this blue because I think it's nice to have a few different blues. So we've got our blue teal, we've got our phthalo blue, we've also got a little bit of that purplish color that we made by mixing our pink with our phthalo, and now we've got the ultramarine blue. And it's really just because I love using color, and I think it helps you guys learn a lot about color when you see me demonstrate it, how to use it, and you're learning about different colors. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to use all of these colors that I'm using in this painting, but it really kind of opens your mind up to where you can apply different colors, different blues, how they can all work together. So that's what I'm doing in my videos, is trying to show you guys the most I can in each video so that you're really not wasting your time by watching. You're learning so much throughout each video about brush strokes, color mixing, composition, highlights and shadows. So now with a clean brush, I'm going to go in with my luminous yellow and white and a little bit of that pinky peach color. I'm going to add a few more highlights and reflections in the water. And then I'm just going to play up a little bit on the saturation in the sky, so I'll be adding, tapping and dabbing a little bit more of that gold and peachy color in there. I will be adding a little bit more neon pink here pretty soon too, and then I'll add a little bit more of my yellow to the pink and just really adding a little bit more color and saturation. So I want to start adding just a little something here. I felt like it was missing something. I wanted to come in and add maybe just a few low-lying branches. So I'm going to come in with my ultramarine blue first, and then I'll tap in a few branches, give it a little bit more depth by going into my black and red color there. And then I'll tap in a little bit of white over top for some snow. And you can tint your white, of course, with the turquoise or the blue. But I'm going to use a little liner brush for this and just wiggle and squiggle and go over, make it look like there's some snow-covered branches here. But you could definitely use a filbert brush if you want and just tap in for some snow-covered branches and foliage. With a clean filbert brush, I've now got more of my neon pink out. I'm going to add a little bit here and there just to play up on the color and saturation like I mentioned earlier. Now I'm just kind of experimenting, seeing what will happen if I play up a little bit more on the pink, and then I decide that I preferred more of the peachy gold color, so you'll see me balance this out by adding a little bit more of my yellow over top and how that can change. Okay, so I'm going to balance out this pink a little bit because I prefer the gold peachy color. So just a little bit more of that luminous yellow warm. And I'm going to add little taps and dabs of it over top of part of my branches just to give it more of that green gold color. Again, just playing up on a little bit more depth and saturation. I really want to keep it nice and bright and soft in the very center of the painting, so the water as well as the sky. That keeps that nice focal point and center of interest, and that light source that's very important, keeping it nice and dark around the edges of the canvas or the sides of the canvas. So I'm going to add a little bit more light and hills here in front of the tree, and I'll add just a little bit down here right by the water and just soften, blend it out a little bit. I'm going to take just a little bit more of this peachy pink color and just round this one area out a little bit more before I blend it out. And I'm going to add a highlight to this branch here, so just a little bit of frost or snow with my teal, maybe a little bit of white in there. Any one of these cool shadow colors that we've been using, just so that it shows up, but I still want to have that red in there. Okay, taking a little bit more of my ultramarine blue with my round brush and some white, I'm going to add some more snow on the side of this tree. Now that it's drying a little bit more, I can make this show up a little bit better. And it's nice to have all those other colors and shades underneath. And just going to tap and dab a little bit here to make it look a little bit more lumpy like. And then I'm going to go over and do the same thing to this other tree here. So notice how I have my brush turned on the side flat, kind of rolling and dragging, so you can practice around beforehand. Really get a good feel for this brush technique and this brush stroke. It's very effective. And I'm going to sign my painting right now because at this point I thought that I was done. And right after I sign it, I'm just using my liner brush, some water, red and black. And right after I finished signing it, I don't know if it's just because I didn't want to finish the painting because I was enjoying it so much, or if I really felt like I needed to add more, but you could leave it as is like this, but I'm going to add a few more things. Including another snow-covered rock in the water. I felt like I just needed another rock right there, so once I finish signing this, I'll start adding a few more highlights, shadows, and details. Okay, back over to my round brush, white, neon yellow warm. I'm going to add a few more little half circles, outlines of rocks here. Make it look like that bright gold sunlight is hitting them. And I'm going to go into white, red, and black, and just define these reflections in the water a little bit more. I'm going to make some of them darker, and then I'll be going over in some areas and adding a little bit more of my smoky powdery blue color for a little bit of ice and some more shadows and reflections in the water. Now notice how, look really close at my brush, I'm kind of wiggling and squiggling it really quickly and tightly together to give it that ripply effect and almost like a blurry effect that your reflections and your mirrored images would have in the water. And then I'm going to start adding a little bit more white to my ultramarine blue here, and I'm going to come in with the first stages of this final rock in the water. So I'm just going to create a little half circle blobby shape here first with that blue and white, and then I'm going to go and pick up some of my red and black and make the bottom of the rock the darkest, that's right next to the water. That's where we're going to have that darkest shadow like we do everywhere else around the base of the water and on the sides. And then I'll add a few little lines here and there for some more reflections and ice and shadows in the water. And I'm going to build up the light towards the top, the middle, and the top of this rock here on the snow. And it's pretty wet right now, so it's going to take a few layers of paint to build it up. So each time I add some paint in my rock or the snow area here, I'm going to pick up a little bit more white. I want to make sure that the outline is darker than the inside, and the bottom of it is darker than the rest. So here I'll just very lightly kind of tap, barely touch with my paint. Because it is wet still, I'm going to use a less pressure. I could speed up the drying process with a hairdryer, but I don't mind taking a little bit of extra time to add more layers here. So I'm going to go underneath and add a shadow and reflection below the rock in the water as well, just with a little bit of that red and black. A little bit of white in there is fine too. And I'll add a few more little reflections and lines in the water, little shapes and shadows, and a little bit more red on either side. I want to make sure I have all those colors tied in together and everything flows nicely within this painting. I didn't expect to like the red so much in this painting. I think that kind of caught me by surprise, and I think I learned something today, even though I've been painting for well over 20 years. It just goes to show you that you can always learn something new, and painting is always exciting. Just when you think that you've you know the ropes and you've tried every color combination you can think of, you just have those days where you're kind of pleasantly surprised. So today I'm really happy that I discovered that red looks nice with all these pastel colors. So I'm going to do this again in the future. I'm really looking forward to painting more like this. I'm going to add just a little bit here more to the base of the tree trunk, come in with my liner brush and add a little skinny line of that sunlight hitting the front of the tree, just with white and a little bit of that neon yellow warm, maybe a little bit of pink in there too, but more towards that golden peachy color. So as I add the last highlights and details to this painting, I want to thank you guys so much for all of your support here on my channel, as well as Patreon, Facebook, and Instagram, and Pinterest. I've got quite a few tutorials that I share on all of those sites on social media, so be sure to join them all. Follow me, tag me in your versions of my paintings. Happy painting, everybody. Take care, and I'll see you all very soon in my next video. Bye!